The path she walks spans 50 years of Pennsylvania politics and public service. It is a trail that has always forged ahead, yet sometimes branched out to reveal some surprising facets of this terribly shy child who grew up to break down many barriers.
For a shy person, I don't know why I was so competitive about sports, but I was never very good because I was too little. I was very small-boned, underweight, thin. But I could do a couple things very well. I could shoot good baskets in basketball, if somebody protected me till I got up close enough.
She is a woman for women who insists she is not a feminist.
And as we sat and talked about what it meant to become a student at the University of Pittsburgh, I remember saying to myself and saying to others immediately afterwards, here's somebody, here's a girl that's going to do something.
A woman who is a shrewd politician and a wise and dedicated public servant.
As a matter of fact, there's no doubt in my mind that if Genevieve Blatt were starting now, as she did, say, in the early 50s, that she would have been the governor of Pennsylvania.
A woman with a rich past who devotes her life to the future.
What does she wear?
She wears a black gown.
And what does she carry?
She doesn't carry it, Mommy.
What does she use?
I don't know what the name of it is.
It's like a little hammer, right?
The gavel.
The gavel.
Right.
A woman of common beginnings who is without question an uncommon woman.
Unique. She's unique. Jen Blatt is unique. She is a one in a million person. The mold was broken after she passed through because I've not met anyone in government or politics like her, and I've been in the business a few years myself.
At age 74, Judge Genevieve Blatt still rises with the sun each morning, attends Mass, and then begins a busy day as a retired senior judge of the Commonwealth Court.
Good morning, Judge. How are you?
Fine. Got a message already?
Yes. Did you have a good evening?
Yeah, fine.
Her schedule would challenge a 30-year-old, signing orders, reviewing cases, meetings in Philadelphia, speaking engagements, nights at the symphony. The traditional concept of retirement has simply never crossed her mind. Genevieve Blatt was born in the small western Pennsylvania town of East Brady, the oldest of 4 children after the family lost a son in infancy. The Blatt children were deeply influenced by parents with strong religious values, a work ethic, and a sense of compassion for others.
I've always had the feeling that parents tend to expect more from their first child that they bring up than from anybody that follows. And perhaps they give up on some of the others after their experience with the first, I don't know. But my parents were very interested in my accomplishing something, whatever I set out to do, and very interested in helping me if they could. I remember once saying to my father that Charles, one of my friends in school, got $1 every time he made a mark over 90. And goodness, I had made a lot of 90s and I never got any dollars. And I can remember my father just said to me, well, the difference is we expect it of you.
The Blatt family moved to Pittsburgh in 1923, but Genevieve was sent to live with her grandmother in McKees Rocks a year before, so she could attend a parochial school. It was here that she would first begin to think about her future, her goals, her aspirations.
There was an announcement that there would be an oratorical contest in which any student could enter, and the subject was the United States Constitution. And so I wrote a little essay on the United States Constitution and memorized it, and I entered it as a candidate from the freshman class. And to my own surprise, and to the surprise I think of most of the other people in the school, the judges said I won the contest. And consequently, I would represent the school in the regional finals. I got a sudden summons to the principal's office, which I remember scared me to death. I probably walked with the most shaking knees you ever saw out into that hallway because I thought I'd done something bad. And after we had a little talk, she said, well, you seem to be a bright little girl and your grades are good. If you can keep your grades up, since you don't seem to be afraid to stand on your feet and speak, goodness knows you might become a lawyer someday. And you know, I'm looking at these books around me and I'm thinking I read voraciously, and I had read about lawyers, but I didn't know really what they did, except that they were all men. And then she went on to say, my sister is a lawyer in Columbus, Ohio. And I thought, lady lawyers? Her sister? A living person? And then I thought to myself, well, she says I could be, maybe I could be.
1929 found the bottom falling out of the New York Stock Exchange, and the panic was on. Overnight, men of wealth were reduced to selling apples on street corners. The prosperity boom of the 20s had exploded like a giant soap bubble, and the United States tumbled down into a bottomless abyss of depression.
In those days, few young adults were lucky enough to find work, let alone dream of going to college. Something about Genevieve, however, sparked an interest in her parish priest, who went to the University of Pittsburgh in search of a way to send her to college. He came home with the first non-public school scholarship for the young valedictorian.
I think when I was in college and began to debate, I picked up a little more nerve to assert myself when I needed to. And all the activities that I took part in, both in high school and in college, I'm sure brought me out of that shell. Although to tell you the truth, I'd still get kind of butterflies when I have to do something new.
90-year-old Miss Helen Rush was the assistant dean of women at the University of Pittsburgh. She recalls a ceremony, the crowning of the senior queen, an elaborate event patterned after the coronation of English royalty.
Genevieve was chosen as wisdom in that ceremony. And I think, as I think back of it, I'm thinking, what a fortunate choice, because as wisdom, she would go to the queen after the queen was seated and place a Bible in her lap. And she said, receive this Bible, the most precious gift the world affords. Blessed is she that readeth and heedeth the words of this book, that keepeth and doeth the things contained in it. So shall the knowledge of wisdom be unto thy soul. When thou hast found it, there shall be a reward, and thy expectation shall not be cut off. Those were the words that Genevieve spoke as she knelt before the queen and placed the little Bible, which was a gift to the queen.
A love for learning would inspire Genevieve Blatt to continue her education, earning a bachelor's degree, a master's degree in political science, and later a Juris Doctor. Her childhood dream had come true. The year was 1937, and she was a lady lawyer.
Yes. Oh, thank you very much.
This year marks the golden anniversary of Judge Blatt's career.
Hello, this is Judge Blatt. We're going to have a conference call now here, and I think everything is set up that I can hear you and your opponent. Let me just check. Is the attorney for the appellant on the line too?
If you ask her what she does, she won't tell you she's a lawyer or a judge. She'll say she's a public servant, and she'll say it with pride and dignity. Because something happened in 1938, something she didn't plan or expect. She fell in love with politics and government. Pittsburgh in the 1930s and early 40s was a dirty, smoky city. Families like the Blatts fought an ongoing battle with the dust. and the battle would escalate at the hands of a young assistant city solicitor.
I was asked to write the first Pittsburgh smoke ordinance. And I must say that in my youthful conviction that only we young people knew what was needed, I didn't think these old people would ever adopt my ordinance, because I had researched London and St. Louis and other people who tried to do something about smoke. And I wrote them such a, in my opinion, good one, that I thought they'd never have the nerve to enforce it. It was the first step, I think, toward Pittsburgh's cleanup, and I think Pittsburgh's cleanup was the first step necessary in its so-called renaissance, because people began to see that that building down the street that everybody thought was black really was pink granite to start with.
In 1946, David Lawrence became the mayor of Pittsburgh and later the governor of Pennsylvania. He would also become Genevieve Blatt's most enthusiastic mentor. Governor Robert P. Casey talks about that special relationship.
She would have been a protege of Governor Lawrence, I think, who really was ahead of his time in the sense that he brought women into positions of prominence at the statewide level, both in the Democratic Party and in public office, long before it was fashionable or thought to be something that ought to happen in terms of the evolution of the role of women in our society. And Jen Blatt was certainly one of his major proteges, and she always reflected great credit and pride on him.
I, Sarah W. Hargrove,
I, Sarah W. Hargrove,
do solemnly swear or affirm
Pittsburgh is dearest to my heart, but Harrisburg is home, Judge Genevieve Blatt once said. And it would seem odd indeed if a major event was underway and she wasn't spotted in the crowd. It was the lure of politics and government that drew Genevieve Blatt home in 1945. Former Governor George Leader.
You and I both ran together in 1952, you for Auditor General, me for State Treasurer, and on that sound truck, all of our name, and Judge Bach, of course, was the lead candidate here in Pennsylvania with us for the United States Senate. And on the sound truck, we used to climb up that ladder to the top of the sound truck.
I remember it well.
Kept you in shape, didn't it? Yes, it? And of course, it had Adlai Stevenson's name on there. And we'd be speaking on the street corners at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon when the school children would come home, and they see Adlai Stevenson, and General Eisenhower was so popular that as more often than not they'd boo us. Yeah.
The duo would lose that election, but it would not dampen their spirits. They were back at it again in 1954. This time the ticket read Leader for Governor, Genevieve Blatt for Secretary of Internal Affairs. In those days, Democrats didn't win many statewide offices, and women, well, a woman, had never been elected in Pennsylvania. But it was time for the tide to turn, and Genevieve Blatt walked away a victor.
I won't say it's a miracle, but it was about one step removed from a miracle that she should have had a series of successes, as she did, being a woman. Had she been a man, there'd been no question about the fact that she could have had anything that the party would have offered her.
Well, I would say that what I was fortunate in, and many other women haven't been, and that was to have some very supportive men friends such as you, who were willing to give me a chance.
She would win 3 successive terms as Secretary of Internal Affairs. Politics, it seemed, was in her blood. Her enthusiasm contagious. Nephew Tom McCluskey remembers.
My older sister and I went to the 1960 convention in Los Angeles, the convention that nominated John Kennedy for the presidency. We went the next night, the night that Lyndon Johnson became the vice presidential nominee, and we started off way up at the top of the sports arena in Los Angeles, and we ended up right down in the middle of the Pennsylvania delegation and sat through the entire session. It really was the thing that triggered my interest in politics to be there that night. It was very exciting. And as is typical with her, she really made us a part of it. I mean, she introduced us to people, and for years following that, I've met some incredible people just by being in her company.
Well, I remember you sitting way up there in peanut heaven, as we used to call it, and I knew that I had 2 seats next to me that the delegates weren't going to come for, and I motioned up to you to come down, and I got a big thrill out of seeing how thrilled they were to be on the convention floor. I was here in Philadelphia to my first one in 1936. I was the first voter for Roosevelt in that campaign, and I will never forget, never, being at Franklin Field when he came up to accept the nomination and seeing him ride around in his open car around the edge of the field, waving into people, cheering and shouting, and then Lily Ponce, the Metropolitan Opera star, came out and sang in his bouffant white evening gown, the bell song from Loch Ness. It was, I can hardly, even now you can probably tell I am emotional thinking about it, because that was the night that he made the speech of acceptance in which he said, "This generation has a rendezvous with destiny."
From a crowded convention floor to a lecture at a local college, it's always easy to spot Judge Genevieve Blatt. She's the woman in the hat. Her hats are her trademark, though not by design. Judge Genevieve Blatt simply adores hats. Her former law clerk, Janine Turgeon, has known the judge since she was 15 years old.
She has the largest collection of hats of any woman or man I know. And some of the law clerks got together several years ago and we had a hat party. And we thought, oh, we hope this isn't disrespectful, but everyone got together and they all brought a different hat. And then we'd say 1, 2, 3 and change hats. And she just had the best time. And so that's kind of a funny story, but yet it's about something that I think everyone thinks of when they think of Judge Blatt. They think of, oh, Genevieve and her hats.
In the 1950s and 60s, newspaper photographers had a standing order. If you run into her, snap a picture of Genevieve and her hat.
Oh, I remember now. That was the famous election in 1964, which I lost. And that was a picture of that hat that landed up in Time magazine, and it looked horrible. Horrible, because it didn't show any of these colors, and it just looked like a mass of some kind of maybe flowers. And I thought people would say, there is a really dizzy dame in that kind of hat. And I was always sorry I wore it at that time, although I enjoyed it.
By a surprisingly narrow margin, she lost the election to Hugh Scott, though it had nothing to do with her choice of hats. Her win in the primary was challenged and not confirmed until just weeks before the general election, leaving little time to campaign. But the first Pennsylvania woman nominated to a U.S. Senate seat had almost won. Over 30 years, she would leave her mark on both state and national offices: Deputy State Treasurer, Deputy Auditor General, Secretary of the Democratic State Committee, and Assistant Director of President Johnson's Office of Economic Opportunity. But a chapter in her political life would come to a close as a new challenge beckoned. This lady lawyer was called back to her law books when Governor Milton Shapp appointed her to the Commonwealth Court in 1972. And then the very next year, she ran and became the first woman elected to a seat on that bench.
She was an administrator and a party official and an outstanding lawyer, but the run for the court and then her service on the court was another breakthrough. And I don't really think that any...
Judge Madeline Palladino was the second woman elected to the Commonwealth Court.
Well, I guess if there's one thing Jen Blatt has in oversupply, it's humility. And she'd be the last to admit that either her conduct or her mere existence established a role that those of us coming behind would follow. But she was a role model. She is a role model.
in a way, I'd like to, if we could, put pro bono to a position where we have given it some good attention. We've got somebody on top.
5 years ago, Judge Genevieve Blatt accepted mandatory retirement from the bench at age 70.
So if we could bring it to their attention, it would be well.
While she continues to serve as a senior judge, there does seem to be a little more time to enjoy life.
When I have leisure time, I'm going to say it doesn't come very frequently. I get myself sometimes overscheduled, and that includes what you might call leisure time activities. I love concerts, I love plays, I just love to travel. My mother used to say that she thought I must have some gypsy blood from somewhere that she didn't know about. I've always loved to go places. I was lucky enough as a child to live along the Allegheny River. Marvelous views, just sat on the front porch and looked at that, and I enjoyed that. And here in Harrisburg, I live along the gorgeous Susquehanna, and I love to look at that. But I don't find myself able to sit still very long and just look, though I enjoy it. And if I have something to occupy my thoughts in a more structured way, then I like a book. Look, there, what does this say? Jenny McCloskey.
Write your name
You
down.
know her?
Write your name, good. Yeah.
Oh, that says Christopher McCloskey, yes.
No, it says, I like Jenny.
Oh, that's true.
Family ties have always been important, so Judge Blatt spends as much time as she can with some 40 nieces and nephews scattered throughout the country. Although she never had children of her own, the many young people she has encouraged and supported through the years consider her part of the family. Among themselves, they call her Aunt Jen.
Judge Blatt has a way of making you feel that you're one of the most important people in her life. And it's because she takes the time to send you the birthday card with a special handwritten note on it. She takes the time to send you a letter of congratulations if you've done anything, no matter how insignificant. She just makes you feel very special, and that makes her so special.
Judge Blatt's lifelong interest in young people was sparked when she herself was just a college student. She helped organize the Intercollegiate Conference on Government, a program that for 37 years would bring students to the state capitol to learn how government works. Governor Casey's Chief of Staff, Bill Kiesling, attended that program in 1953.
And she was a tremendous role model. In those days, there weren't very many women who were, one, lawyers, and two, elected statewide public officials. When I met her, she was the Secretary of Internal Affairs. And the tremendous role model that she provided, not just for the young women who badly needed these kind of role models, but for those of us who were young men who could see that women had the capacity to be leaders and to be important in the professions and important to the civic and political life of this Commonwealth. That made a very important contribution, I think, to those of us as part of our real education. And I think some of us went on to become feminists because of influences of people like Judge Blatt.
Judge Blatt was also a founder of the James A. Finnegan Fellowship Foundation, named in honor of her close personal friend. Through a summer internship, it too encourages young people to care about government and consider public service as a career. No one questions why she spends countless hours encouraging young Finnegan scholars and law clerks, speaking and listening to college students, and involving youth in celebrations of democracy. Everyone seems to know that Judge Blatt is simply practicing what she believes so firmly. The future of this nation and Commonwealth depends on today's youth.
One aspect of Judge Blatt's personality that I treasure the most is her incredible ability to nurture, support, and be encouraging to young people. From all of the young people that I know she was involved with since their youth, she's always encouraged them to proceed and move forward, and no matter what decision you make, she supports that decision.
I really don't like to say I'm proud of anything, because anything I've done, I look back and think I could have done it better, could have been smarter. But for what I could bring myself to say, I think what I'd like to be remembered is that I did help to get a lot of women interested in government that might not otherwise have been, and got their abilities recognized, and gave us all the benefit of their performance, which has been excellent. I said when I was elected to office myself, it was nice to be the first, but I certainly didn't want to be the last, and I'm glad I wasn't the last, and I'm glad that so many women have come in since to show not only what women can do, but how we really need the women's influence in governmental activities. And the other thing I'd like to be remembered for is that I believe I've encouraged a lot of good young people, educated, qualified, dedicated young people, to consider and to enter into public service careers. I've had some wonderful experiences along that line, and I'm pretty proud of that, I guess.
Judge Genevieve Blatt says she'd like to write a book someday, although one has to wonder if she'll ever make time for herself.
I guess I'd just like to be considered a friend. And if I ever write a book, it will be about the friends I've had, without whom, nothing that I've done could have been done. I didn't do anything by myself. I was lucky enough maybe to persuade a few people to join that might not have otherwise, but most of the people that I can think of gave me so much help along the way that I'm very proud of my friends, and I hope they're reasonably pleased with me.
If she does write that book, no title will ever live up to the contents. Perhaps she could be convinced to call it An Uncommon Woman.